Hello, I'm Ludwig, and in today's live stream, I'm going to answer the question that one of you asked me just before our previous Reddit Ask Me Anything webinar. So the question is, boom. Roger asked the question, if I'm using an integer type for my primary key on a table that has thousands of inserts daily, what happens when I reach that integer maximum value? So let me just present you with a, again, demo so you can learn on the go how it really works. So in here I do have my little database in here. I just called it SQL Bootcamp. Let me just refresh that database real quick. Tadam, you can see that this is absolutely empty. It doesn't have any table. So what I want to do is I want to build my first table. Now, again, I want to show you that a process in both visual and code way. So I'll just start with building a new table. I will call it table 1, just like that. The first column type will be the ID. And again, since in Roger's case, he's using the integer data type, I'll just use the tiny integer, which is just 255. This is the maximum number that you can get into the table like that. In order to show you the process, because it works exactly the same for any data type, any numeric data type, if you just run out of possible values. So again, instead of using a regular integer, instead of going bigger for a big integer and going smaller for a small integer, for example, I'll just go with a tiny integer. And tiny integer can get any value from 0 to 255, just like that. So I don't want to allow nulls in here, and I'll just create another column that I'll just say that it'll be called column data, just like that. And this will be nchar, but let's just do it in nchar 8. Just like that, okay? So this first column does not allow nulls, the other one does. Well, in my case, I will fill it out with the data anyways, so I may not be allowing those nulls, but what I want to make this ID column, I want to make it an identity column. So basically, I wanted to automatically increment every single time someone is adding a new value to that, a new row to that table, right? Now, how do I do that? In here, I don't see any options for that, but in the column properties, if I'll click on my ID column again, what I can do is I can scroll down and I can see that I do have this function here that says identity, this property in here that says identity specification. And I can change it from no to yes, just like that. Boom. And I can also create identity increments and seeds. Now, increment means what is the interval that will be changing. So I'll have 1 and 1 and 1 mean 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I created it as 2, that would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 3 and 5 and 7 and 9 and so on and so forth. So the odd numbers. You get the idea. Now, why does it start with 1? This is because I have the identity seed set to 1. So I'm starting with 1 and not starting from some other number. If I wanted to start from 100, then I would have 100, 102, 104, 106, 8, 10, and so on and so forth, right? So I'll just keep it simple. I'll just start with the default value, which is 1 and 1, all right? And that's it. I'll just hit save in order to save that table. Or what I can do is I can just close this query and do exactly same thing on my code. Now I'll just delete this part about the primary file group because it absolutely doesn't matter for us right now. So using the SQL Bootcamp database, what I want to do is I want to create a table called DBO table 1, and I want to have 2 columns. ID column, which will be tiny integer as we configured it. Then I want to have the identity column, which starts at 1 and increments by 1 every single time, and it will be not null. And the column data, which as we said, will be an nchar column, which also will be not null, so it will not accept any null values. Now I want to create this table. Execute that. Tadam! You can see that command completed successfully, but in order to see that on my tables folder, I need to refresh that. Now, I want to select some data from my table. As you can expect, this table is completely empty, right? I'm selecting top 1000 rows. I don't need this top 1000 because I just need the ID column and the column data from SQLBootcamp.dbo.table1. Now, this is the column name, this is my schema, this is my database. So this is a fully qualified name in here. If I'm running this query in here, you can see that it brings me no data. So what I want to do is I want to start inserting some data into that column. Now I could just start writing some random queries in here, but instead I'll just use a function. There is a function in SQL Server that's called new ID, which will basically, without providing any additional parameters, I'll just, boom, see a new identifier that will be added in here. So what I would, as you can see, every single time I'm running this query, ta-da, it just generates a new string that I want to use. Now, since my column ID is limited to just 8 characters, what I want to do is I don't want to select the entire new ID. Maybe I just want to use the function that you know from Excel, right? So the new ID, and the new ID column in here, boom, left new ID. I just want to pull 8 characters from that. Boom, execute. And you can see that I have 8 values, 8 values, 8 values, and just like that. Okay, so I will have some random strings in here. Now, the next step that I want to do is I want to insert that data into my table. So what I can do is I can say, hey, insert into DBO table 1. I'll just copy the name of this table in here and paste it. Boom. These values. So insert into this select. Let me just take a quick peek at what we have in the database right now. Ta-da, the value number 1 with this one. Let me just run it again. Boom, execute. 1 row affected, perfect. What is in my database? Ta-da, the value number 2 with a different string. Now I could just run it over and over and over again till I reach the point of 255 in order to show you the actual result, right? But what I want to do instead is I want to use the undocumented feature of the Go keyword that is specific to TSQL, and you can change it to whatever you want, but this is the different story for all of your Easter eggs that you can implant in your SSMS, especially for your colleagues, if you want to become the BOFH, so the bastard operator from hell. But what we want to do right now is we want to insert this data not twice, not 3 times, not 200 times manually. I want to run it automatically. So instead of creating a loop saying, hey, I want to create a variable, and based on that variable, I want to increment this or perform the action, then increase this variable by 1, and then wait for this loop to finish multiple times, I'll just say, hey, get this dear SQL Server Management Studio, get this batch of code and run it 10 times, all right? Boom, execute. You can see that the beginning execution loop, 10 times, and I do have the information at the end that the batch execution completed 10 times. So what it means for me is that if I'll go to execute, you can see that I have 12 rows right now because I had 2 at the beginning and then I have 12 just like that. So what I'll do right now is I'll just run this query again, but right now I'll run it 200 times, all right? So again, I should have 200, oh, not 200. I want to run 230 times because this way I'll have 240 times. Here we go. Because this way I have 252 of the rows in there. Hit execute. Ta-da! You can see that at the end I do get the information that the execution completed 240 times. So if I'm not mistaken with my math, if I'll hit execute, ta-da, I do see, ta-dam, 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 all the way down, 252 rows in my table. Now let me just add a few more, and again, this is back to Roger's question, thousands of inserts. In my case, it's hundreds of inserts, and just like that. So I'll just use it again, 253rd, 254th, and right now, again, in order to check that this is the maximum number that you're having in here, again, I'm not sorting this data I'm just showing you this step by step, 254 rows of data. And right now, what I'm having in here is the last insert that I can perform. Okay, 255. As we agreed, this is the maximum number that the tiny integer column can take in. So in the very next step, when as you can see right now, I have 255, boom. The next run should insert 256th column row into my table. So let's run it. Ta-da. Unfortunately, I get the arithmetic overflow error converting identity to the data type tiny integer. So basically, I went over the top, right? I cannot right now insert anything new to this table because I don't have any space left, right? Because this is how the identity column works. You'll just keep incrementing. It just hit the wall, right? So what I want to do right now is I need to answer myself a question. Hey, how do I fix that? What can I do if I don't have more space? Well, obviously I could delete some of the rows, right? Well, let's give it a try. So again, back to my demo, what I want to do right now is I want to delete data from my column that's called, my table that's called DBO table 1. And I don't want to delete everything. I just want to delete, let's say, last 10 rows, right? So I'll have 10 rows left. Delete from DBO table 1, where ID, again, I prefer to have all of the columns in the square brackets because this is the best practice and best naming convention. So where the ID column is greater than 245, 200, not 10, 245. Ta-da. So if I run this query right now, execute, you can see that it worked perfectly fine. I deleted 10 rows. I want to take a quick peek at my data. Ta-da, scroll all the way down, and as you can see right now, boom, 245 rows. So I have 10 left, right? I should be able to insert those 10 additional rows. Let's give it a try. Oh my, it still didn't work. Why? Because again, the counter already changed, right? The counter was incremented at the level of 255, and that's where the counter is. I cannot add anything more because it's not like SQL Server is checking whether or what is the maximum number of the row in there right now at this very moment, and then I'll add another one because that would be extremely inefficient. Even worse, if that was how the SQL Server worked, if I deleted the data for all of the rows that have ID less than 10, right? Boom. All right, so right now I should start, the first row should be number 10, that's correct. As you can see, this is the very first row that I have in my table right now. What's happening is that if SQL Server worked as we discussed, that I'm just checking the maximum value, should it insert the data in here in the first row, the second row, the third row, and so on and so forth, and then jump somewhere else? What if you have multiple different gaps between your identity column numbers? SQL Server would have to keep track of each one of those, and then it would be absolute mess in terms of efficiency and the performance of your database. So the counter goes up and up and up. So what we can do in here, well, first of all, we could just try and delete everything, right? Boom, delete everything, execute. Right now, everything got deleted. My table is completely empty. Boom, I'm trying to insert something and it still doesn't work because the delete column, the delete clause will not reset those counters, right? If you want to truly delete everything from the table, you have only two ways. You can either drop this table and recreate it again, or what you can do is you can truncate this same table. Boom. I'll just truncate this table. Boom. Truncate table. Execute. Ta-da! Command complete successfully. Now truncate works the same way on the surface as delete from, because it just deleted everything from that table. But then if I start inserting my data into that table, you can see that the truncate resetted all of the counters, right? Now, let's again assume that I want to, since this is advanced series, what I want to show you is what happens if you really want to insert the data into the identity column in a manual way. So again, let's perform the very same tasks as we did before. I'll just go 254 right now. Ta-da! I'll fill up this table with data. I'll hit execute. I'll scroll all the way down to verify how many rows I have. Ta-da! 255. So you could just say select count star from this table and it will just give you the number of rows, but we want to see the IDs of those rows as well. And right now I'll just delete from the same table where ID column is less than 10 or 11. So this way I'll delete all of the rows from 1 to 10. All right, so again, as usual, you need to select the data, execute the data, and you can see that even though it's filled out completely all the way up to 255, I do have those 10 rows that I could insert at the very beginning. So what I want to do right now is I want to again insert into this table the particular values. Boom. But what I want to do again is I want to explicitly provide SQL Server with the identity values, right? Because I do know that I do have those spaces in there, right? I do have those rows that I could fit in, and I want to. And SQL Server tells me I cannot. I do not like being told things, so let me just show you how you can do that. I'll just paste the same query again in here. Boom. But you can see, again, we have to dissect what this insert into means. So I want to insert into this table the particular values. Again, if I wanted to be super professional, I could say, hey, insert into these columns. So my columns will be column data, the following values. Ta-da. And there will go my select in here, right? Ta-da. This is my select. I need to have enough parentheses in here. All right. So again, execute. Ta-da. I see that it doesn't work. So what I want to do is I want to say, hey, I don't want to insert only to the column data because I know the ID is being auto-incremented. What I want to do right now is I want to insert the explicit ID value and then the column data. And in my case, this will be just 1. So on the row number 1, I want to add number 1 and then this particular value, right? It should fit. I do have a space for that. So I'll just run it. But again, my oh my, I cannot insert the explicit value for identity column table 1 when the identity insert is turned on. So what I need to do is I need to say, hey, I want to set the identity insert, boom, on this particular table to on, all right? So of course I would have to, as usual, provide it with the table name. Ta-da. No, not like this one. Hold on a sec. I just need to provide it with this one. Copy. The reason why I'm not using Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V is because I am on a virtual machine that does not paste the keyboard shortcut properly, but don't worry about that. So I'll just execute this command in here. Ta-dam, worked perfectly fine. And right now, again, let me just remind you, what do I have in my table? Execute. You can see that it starts from 11 and goes all the way down, all the way up to 255. This query will work right now. So I can, where is this query of mine? Here we go. Again, if you want to have access to this query, it is in our little GitHub repository, so go and check out the description below once you'll be subscribing to this little channel. And then you'll have access to all of this code that I'll just upload the moment this live is done. So what I want to do is I want to insert into this table, to the column identity, to the column data, value number 1, and then this ID that I'll generate in here. I'm inserting that data, 1 row affected. It worked perfectly fine. Now, if I'll take a look at my data, boom, execute, it works perfectly fine. But how about if I set my counter to 1 right now, okay? What if I said, hey, I want to select the data again, insert the data again, but I'll just provide you, dear SQL, with this select in here, with this new ID value. What will you do? Will you insert it into the number 2 or... Boom. Unfortunately, you will not, because again, explicit value must be provided when the identity insert is turned on. All right. So if I want to, again, rely on what SQL Server will provide me with, what I need to do is I need to change this setting again. So I want to disallow basically from myself from inserting the values to the identity columns explicitly. So what I'll do again is I'll just execute this code. Now let's give it a try. What is the question? What is your guess? Will I insert the data on the row number 2, or will I get another arithmetic overflow error? Why is that? Because again, even though I've explicitly said I want to insert the column on the row number 1, the counter is still at row number 255, all right? So again, if I were to switch back to my little drawing in here, hold on a sec, bear with me as I'm reconnecting my iPad in order to show you something. Hold on a sec. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. If this is my table in here, right? Boom. I didn't want to have the ellipses in here. Here we go. This is my table. I have just the ID column. I have my column data, right? And if I went all the way down to 255, the maximum number that the tiny integer column can take in, if I said, hey, I want to delete those columns in here, those rows in here, and then I inserted the number 1 explicitly, even though I do have a space in here to provide with the additional data, my counter is still at the level of 255, so I won't be able to add anything more to that table unless I'll truncate that table. Again, we already tried it with a delete from clause, and you've seen that the delete from will not help us at all because it will not change anything regarding our counters. Only the truncate table will help. So again, Roger, I hope this answers your question. What will happen if you'll reach the max limit on your table? It works the very same way for tiny integer, for small integer, for big integer. These are the columns that we're using for our primary keys quite often, unless you'll go for the unique identifiers. But this is a completely different story for a different video on this SQL Bootcamp online channel. Again, if you want to subscribe and keep up with all of the advanced series, please go ahead and do so. You have the subscribe button somewhere in here below. But I would suggest that you wouldn't trust the YouTube algorithm itself. Just go to SQL Bootcamp Online, leave me with your email, and I'll be sending you the little emails every single time I'm going live or the new video is being uploaded. And as a bonus, if you stayed till the very end of that video, down below this video there is an invitation waiting for you for my SQL Discord, secret SQL Discord community, where you can hang out with all of the other DBAs and DB devs to talk about SQL Server. This is just starting out, so you will be a pioneer in that community. So again, thank you very much. I'm Ludwig, and I'll see you in the very next episode of SQL Bootcamp Online. See you on the other side.